So, Mr. Secretary, in my opening statement, I referred to the fact that you are responsible for acquisition and sustainment matters to include maintenance and the importance of our maintenance availabilities in both the private and public shipyards. What have you done since the last year to improve the performance of ship maintenance programs and to keep individual overhauls from being late?
Yes, ma'am. So we've taken a multiple pronged approach. We've started with the planning phase, and we are putting more resources into planning up front for an availability, getting the work packages defined, getting the long lead material bought sooner in the process than we have in the past. In the contracting phase, we've moved to what we call A-120, where we try to award the contracts. I'm talking about our private shipyards now. 120 days before the availability to give the contractor a chance to get up to speed and understand the work before we get into the actual the project. And then we have really done a focused effort, what we call a plan to perform, of what are the key criteria for the success of an availability, and then make sure we understand the levers that we would pull in order to be able to succeed, right? What are the key things, and make sure we are focusing on the most important data to be able to affect the availability once it's started. Except for the contracting part, ma'am, we are doing the same type of items on the public shipyards as well, looking at the availability of equipment up front at the public shipyards, and then doing that plan to perform process where we're really pulling the thread hard on processes within those shipyards.
So, Mr. Secretary, as with the shipbuilding side, on the maintenance side and repair side, you're probably seeing issues of workers, not enough trained workers, and the supply chain issues. So what specifically are you doing to address those particular problems?
Yes, ma'am.
On the shipyard, the repair side?
Yes, on the repair side, yes, we are seeing both supply chain delays due to COVID impacts, as well as workforce where we are not having the workforce that we need up here, and it's happening in new construction as well. So your point is very valid. We are working with the shipyard, regional shipyard associations on pipelines for future workforce to try to get skilled workers from out of the colleges and the trade schools into the trade. That's a longer term thing. It's not happening immediately, but we're seeing younger folks coming into the business through the trade schools we've set up. For the actual work, we actually are, I'll say, illuminating. We have tools to illuminate where our supply chain is really having trouble and trying to attack that in advance, ma'am.
So I think that the lack of trained workers has been an issue long before COVID. It's been exacerbated by COVID. So I hope that you are doing something to turbocharge the focus on recruiting and retention, shipyard workers, both on the shipbuilding side as well as on the repair side. I don't have the answers to the lack of workers, but it is a major concern ongoing. So you're going to get asked those questions every time you come before either SASC or this subcommittee. Now, regarding there's going to be a gap in the number of America-class LHAs, the amphibious ships. And so my information is after the fourth total of the 11 originally planned is finished in 2023, then you're not going to get any more of these LHAs for another 8 years or so. And was that a budget decision? And if so, what happens when you need to resume production or construction of these LHAs, and then the shipyard is going to have to ramp up? What happens regarding the construction of these ships at that point with that kind of a long gap?
Yes, ma'am. Quickly on the last one. For workforce, we do have funding in the 23 budget to actually go and try to accelerate those workforce development programs. I just want to finish that last question. With this question, ma'am, yes, the LHA type ships about 5 years apart. We call it 5-year centers. So the previous ship is in 23. The next ship most efficiently would be built in 28. It is affordability reason of why it's not in it as a 28 ship. It's just in the overall budget, why it's sitting out there in 31. But we will relook that in the coming budget cycle, ma'am.
Well, I would ask that you do that. Make sure regarding the funding for the shipyard modernization, does your fiscal year 23 budget fully fund this year's plan for the shipyard modernization plan?
Yes, ma'am. The budget this year increased to almost $1.8 billion and fully funds all of our plans for 23 through 27. Yes, ma'am.
So when we talk about a multi-year contracts, though, is inflation an issue with regard to how you're going to come up with the negotiations for these multi-year contracts? How do you account for inflation and some of the other factors that may need revisions to the contract?
Yes, ma'am. So in our shipbuilding contracts, we have an economic price adjustment clause, a special clause we put in that accounts for inflation. It actually makes an assumption, and then if it gets outside of that, higher or lower, we can adjust the contract as we go. So in our shipbuilding contracts, we don't have that in other places, but in our shipbuilding contracts, we do have what we call an EPA clause to protect the company from risk going up or down.
That's good, because the issue had come up in the SASC hearing this morning. The Navy has presented a 5-year shipbuilding plan that includes 2 destroyers per year for a total of 10 ships. And I understand that the Navy intends to request another round of multi-year procurement authority for destroyers, but for 9 ships, with an option to add another ship to the multi-year contract at some point in those 5 years, and an option to buy a third each year for a maximum possible of 15. That's what you're contemplating.
Ma'am, yes, we are modeling the planned multi-year after the one we have right now. And the one we have right now has 10 ships in the multi-year with a competitive option for a third ship in each year. That's the basis for what we plan to do in the future one. The one exception, as you noted, being that we would have 9 firm ships instead of 10 firm ships in that baseline contract. But otherwise, the terms that we're anticipating for the new contract will be the same as the one that's in place right now. Again, that hasn't been approved yet. That's just our initial, plan as we're going forward.
Just so I understand, then I know that there is interest in this committee for 15 destroyers instead of the 10, so you are creating a situation where we can get to 15 if you exercise that option, provided that we fund that option, which means that you will request funding for that option to be exercised. Is that correct?
It is
Am I understanding this?
It is our Navy plan at this point to go forward so that if we did request a third ship, we have the ability to buy it. But that, again, we're in the early stages, ma'am. I don't want to make that a commitment from the department yet.
Okay, well, when you say commitment from the department, does that mean that you do have to request that the money for the additional 5?
We would have to request the money for the additional 5, yes.
And would you do that?
At the
Because
budget
as you
process.
said, there's an interest in this
You've seen the
committee
23 budget, ma'am, and 24 and out will have to play out through the normal requirements process. So I can't make a commitment on 24 and out, and you've seen our budget proposal for 23, which is only 2 ships in 23. So,
Okay, but going forward, though, if,
I mean, we're kind of in a little.
you see what I'm getting at, right? I think some of us would like to get you to 3 ships instead of 2 ships.
So our plan is to have a contract that will allow that, but we would have to discuss in the budget process
Yes.
actually how it gets paid for if we were to do that.
Okay, I personally would encourage that, because I assume that we need more of these ships, right? We need more destroyers. Yes.
I'll have to let the Admiral discuss actually the requirements for destroyers.
Admiral? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I forgot to push my button. The requirements for large service combatant is 96, at least from the latest INSFA, and then, the Integrated Naval Force Structure Assessment that was done in 2019. And then the Future Naval Force Study reduced that number a little bit. In Alternative 3, we get up to 80, and again, that was based on our understanding of industrial capacity. But it's large service combatants, small service combatants, the number of frigates. I don't look at any particular capability. I have to look across a task force issue, if you will. and how we're going to employ that force with our submarines and the dominance they have in the undersea domain, with the large surface combatants, the small surface combatants, and the carrier wing.
So do I understand you correctly, Admiral, that option 3 of the 3 options you laid out, that option 3 gets you where you would like to be?
It gets us closer to where we'd
Closer.
like to be.
But how practical, how realistic is that option compared to the other 2 options in terms of the funding that would be made available and other considerations?
The fiscal certainty of that option, I really can't speak to right now. I can say in terms of where we are today, the answer would be no. But again, this is starting growth per the shipbuilding plan in 2028 and out in order to get to the, whether it be 3 DDGs per year, 3 frigates per year, 3 submarines per year, getting into an SSN-X by the 2040s. I mean, all that, I will say, is there is some uncertainty in that path forward.
Thank you. Senator Kramer.